I found an article online that was titled 17 Benefits of Storytelling. Let me tell you some of them. Actually, I'm going to tell you all 17 of them. 17 blessings of storytelling. Storytelling ignites curiosity. It expands horizons. It helps you learn about the challenges of life. It increases your memory, develops a passion for books, for reading. It impacts our minds, grows our vocabulary, and teaches us a whole curriculum. It helps us understand society, and it tricks our imagination. It also provides entertainment and fun, and storytelling stimulates our creativity. It gives us confidence, it develops our brain, and it helps us listen and pay attention. In one word, storytelling is magic. It provides hope. Out of all these 17 descriptions of the benefits of storytelling, only one has a negative connotation, slightly, just a little bit of a negative connotation, which is more realistic than negative, really, which is that it helps us experience the challenges of life, or it helps us face the challenges of life. So there is a hint that maybe in life there are things that are difficult and challenging and real and painful. But everything else, 16 of the 17 descriptions, are all positive. That is not right, because it's not real. That's not what life is like. Yet, this reflects, I think, the parenting philosophy of baby boomers, Gen Xers, and on and on. Even millennials. Millennials already have children. Even some Z have children. We are parenting, trying to protect our children from the difficulties of life. There are many problems with that. One of them is that when they face the difficulties of life, because newsflash, you will not be able to protect them from the difficulties of life. When they do, they're not prepared for it. And they want to run away. And they run away into all sorts of things, from drugs to sex to social media to eating disorders, or the opposite of eating disorders. All kinds of stuff that we use to numb the pain, to run away from the pain. So these benefits of storytelling are actually hiding the nature of what a story is supposed to be. See, in the stories that we have heard long ago, there are bad people. And bad things happen to good people and to bad people. But the stories we're telling nowadays, they don't have bad people. They don't have bad things that happen to anyone. And that's not how life is. It's dangerous to tell those stories. I want to tell you one benefit of storytelling that I think trumps all of these 17. And that is that storytelling has the ability to help us experience the pains of life. Storytelling has the ability to help us experience the pain, that we face in life. They prepare us for change. You see, stories are all about change. When we seek to protect our children from pain, from change, we are placing ourselves in the place of God. We want to direct and control the story. And we want to eliminate any source of unpleasantness. Story is going to find a way to come out. Pain and change will be necessary. And we will have a mess. Perhaps worse than if we would have prepared all children, grown adults, if we would have prepared them for the experience and the need for change. We all need change because change aligns us to the purposes of God for our lives. We are born out of alignment with the purposes of God. And the only way for us to get in line is by going through change. And at the heart of change is pain. Let me tell you what the components of a story are. See, a story consists of a good desire that a protagonist has and an opposing desire from the antagonist. You have a protagonist and the antagonist, and they both want something that is in opposition to each other. And the process of bringing the good desire of the protagonist to pass, to come to fruition, to be fulfilled, is by reversing the evil desire of the antagonist. You must go through this change. For your good desire, for the purposes that God has placed in your heart to come to pass, for what you want your life to look like, for what you want to be when you grow up, there has to be a reversal of the forces that are opposing you. You are going to experience opposition. Therefore, you need to experience a reversal. That means change. You have to go through change. There is no other way. You might as well just resign yourself and enroll in this class early so you graduate early. Sooner or later, whether you want it or not, whether you enroll voluntarily or somebody pushes you in, you are going to have to go through change, and the heart of change will be this confrontation from an opposing force that you cannot avoid forever. This is why God reveals His truth in the form of stories. It's the best way. Because real life involves that change, that confrontation. So one of the best things that we can do for ourselves is to understand how stories work. Because our lives are a story. They're not a list. They're not a random text or an email. They are a story. So the sooner we understand how stories work, the better prepared we are going to be to undergo the change necessary for the purposes that God has placed in our lives to come to fruition, to come to pass. I want to talk to you today about waiting on God, waiting on God's reversals to see the purpose of your life fulfilled. Wait on God's reversals in your life when He turns around the forces that oppose you so that you can experience that change that brings about your desire, your purpose. So we're going to talk about this. And we're going to do it using the story of Purim, of course, the story of Esther. So what I want to do today is briefly show you the structure of Esther, and then the lesson of Esther. Isn't that great? I have 2 points today. We should be out of here for, like 20 minutes earlier than usual. Only 2 points. Okay, what I'm not telling you is that we're going to take a comprehensive overview of the entire book of Esther. 10 chapters. But as we talk about the structure and the lesson of Esther, I want us to focus on the fact that it is through waiting on God's reversals that the structure of Esther makes sense and the lesson of Esther emerges. The structure and the lesson, they all combine to teach us one thing: wait on God's reversals. So come with me to Esther. I'm going to begin in Esther 1:1. And I promise that we're gonna do it a little bit in the style that we have been following with the book of Mark, with the Gospel of Mark. So we are not going to get so bogged down into the details, but I want us to see an overview so that we can understand how the book works together in all the parts and tell a story. And it's going to be fascinating. I'm going to require that you use your brain today. I'm sorry. I apologize ahead of time. This story is so artistically well put together that you have to engage all of who you are in order to get the message that's in it. All right. First of all, let's talk about the structure then. The structure of Purim is about waiting on God's reversal. That's what the structure is. And what do I mean by the structure? Okay. We're going to see this is, I've talked to you about this before. One of the names for this is a menorah structure. So in a menorah structure, you have, let's use Hanukkah, right? You have 4 points on one side, 4 points on the other side, and there's one in the middle that stands out. That's how Esther is put together. We're going to see the build-up to the middle, and then a reversal of the same points going back. We'll use numbers for the different points, and then corresponding mirroring numbers. Number 1, and then 1 mirror. 2 and 2 mirror. 3 and 3 mirror. Things like that. But we'll see what's right there in the middle. Okay. So, first of all, Esther 1:1. Let's read it together. It says, "Now, it took place in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, as King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne, which was at the citadel of Susa." Thank you. um, yeah, we're going to break it up as we read, and we're not going to read the entire thing, but we'll break it up. So here's the first point. Here is telling us in verses 1 and 2 the greatness of Ahasuerus. That's number one. Later on, I'm going to show you one mirror, right? The mirror of this first point. But for now, number one is the greatness of Ahasuerus. Number two, the banquets of the Persians. That's number two, the banquets of the Persians. We see it here in verse 3. So verse 3 says, in the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his princes and attendants, the army officers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of his provinces being in his presence. And he displayed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor of his great majesty for many days, 180 days. Wow, what a party. I'm not sure I want to be there. But, all right, they know how to party, right? Verse 5, when these days were completed, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days. Amazing. All right, so 2 banquets. These are the banquets of the Persians, all right? Okay, we'll move on a little bit. Let's go to chapter 2. Pick it up in verse 10, 2:10. This is point number 3. Esther hides her Jewish identity. We know she did this. We know Mordecai instructed her to do this, right? So let's read about it. It says, verse 10, Esther did not make known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known. Every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. So she goes in there, she hides her Jewish identity, so she looks like she's a Gentile. She goes in there, and this is their plan, and God is going to use this plan. So number 3, Esther hides her Jewish identity. Number 4, chapter 3, verse 1. Let's read 3:1. It says, after these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. Boo. Promoted Haman, the son of, hard name to pronounce, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. Haman is elevated. He is exalted. That's point number 4. Haman was exalted. He was elevated. And the result is going to be an anti-Jewish edict. An anti-Jewish edict. That's what we're going to see in verse 12. Oh, would you look at that? Thank you. Let's put it away for now, and we'll pick it up on the second half of it. So number 5 is an anti-Jewish edict. Verse 12. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. I don't think I've ever shared with you. Maybe we'll do this next year. We'll talk about the dates in the book of Esther. Do you recall what the first month is? The month of Aviv, the month of Nisan, same thing. And what happens on the 14th day of Nisan? Passover. Did you read what day this is? The king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, the day before Passover. You think that would be important? But that's another message. Sorry, you're going to have to come back next year for Purim. So it keeps saying, verse 12. And it was written just as Haman commanded to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, and to the princes of each people, each province according to its script, each people according to its language, being written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month. So on the first month, this edict is pronounced the day before Passover. That in a year's time, they're going to kill all the Jews. So that's, the 12th month is where we are right now. This is when Purim takes place, the month of Adar. That's right now. Because we are literally a month away from celebrating Passover. Imagine you going to Seder that year. When you woke up that morning of Passover to get everything ready, you read in the papers, you check your Facebook, and there's an edict there to annihilate all the Jews. That was probably not a good Passover that year. But there were many other things that happened, and like I said, that's another message. So, verse 13. So letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, to seize their possessions as plunder. A copy of the edict to be issued as law in every province was published to all the people so that they should be ready for this day. The couriers went out impelled by the king's command while the decree was issued at the citadel in Susa, and while the king and Haman sat down to drink, the city of Susa was in confusion. All right, so let me review again. Number one, the greatness of Ahasuerus. Number two, the banquets of the Persians. 3, Esther hides her Jewish identity. 4, Haman is exalted, elevated. 5, there's an anti-Jewish edict. And number 6, Mordecai's petition to Esther. So we see that in chapter 4. Chapter 4, verse 10. Here's the famous words that Mordecai is going to say to Esther, right? We know these words. In verse 10 it says, Then Esther spoke to Hatnach and ordered him to reply to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king, to the inner court, who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he will be put to death, unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. They related Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, Do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, Go, assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens also will fast in the same way, and thus I will go in to the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So this is Mordecai's petition to Esther. We know she is going to we know she's going to come in, and the king is going to extend his scepter to her, and she's not going to die. The king is going to ask her, what's your petition, what's your desire? And she's going to say, I want you and Haman to come to a banquet with me. So that's number 7. Esther's first banquet with the king and Haman. So in verse 6, chapter 5, verse 6 says, as they drank their wine at the banquet, the king said to Esther, what is your petition? For it shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be done. So Esther replied, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in your sight, in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king says. You should get cold feet or something. I mean, it's right there. Why do tomorrow when you are right there, right? She could have just asked her petition. But I suspect that inside of her, she knew it's not the right time. It's not the right time. Everything looks right. It's not the right time. And she probably was, as the words were coming out of her mouth, she was like, why am I saying this? This is stupid. I'm asking them to come to another banquet tomorrow. What am I doing? Okay, I guess I'm going to trust God. I'm going to trust God. And I just feel led this way. And she did. Then we come to number 8. Number 8 is that middle part, that middle section. Verse 1, chapter 6. And we're going to read all of chapter 6. It says, during that night, right, she tells them, come back tomorrow. During that night, the king could not sleep. So he gave an order to bring the book of the records, the chronicles, and they were read before the king. It's kind of like reading the phone book, if you remember what that was. Go read me the phone book so I can fall asleep. All right. Verse 2. It was found written what Mordecai had reported concerning Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs, who were doorkeepers, that they had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. The king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? Then the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. So the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows which he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, behold, Haman is standing at the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what is to be done for the man who the king desires to honor? And Haman said to himself, Every time you read in Scripture, somebody spoke to themselves, it's bad. It's bad. Not going to turn out well for them. So Haman said to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? Then Haman said to the king, for the man who the king desires to honor, let them bring a royal robe which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king has ridden, and on the horse and on whose head a royal crown has been placed. And let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princes, and let them array the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Then the king said to Haman, take quickly the robe and the horse, as you have said, and do so for Mordecai, the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fall short in anything of all you've said. So Haman took the robe and the horse, and he arrayed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home, mourning, with his head covered. And Haman recounted to Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hastily brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. This chapter is the middle section, dramatically speaking. This is the confrontation. Finally, Haman and Mordecai are face to face. It doesn't go as planned. It is reversed. So much leading up, so much drama, so much conflict, so much build-up, going and building up to this confrontation. That's how stories work. And that's how your story works. There is always another tunnel at the end of this tunnel. Until you come to the confrontation. If you quit because the ramp up is too much pressure, too much drama, too much pain, all you're doing is going right back to square one. It may be different people and different place, different circumstances, but it will be the same you that has to go through the development of the conflict, the pressure building up to the point where you have this confrontation. By teaching our children that all stories are all nothing but good, nothing but positive, we do not develop their ability to persevere so they can get to the point of the confrontation. Without the point of the confrontation, you don't have the second half. And you see, unfortunately, we misunderstand stories. We think that the height of the story is this conflict, this clash, this confrontation, where the good guy and the bad guy, they finally hash it out. And the fight, that's not the middle of the story. That's not the climax. That is the climax, but it's not the most important part of the story. What follows the climax, what follows this confrontation, that's the reversal. That's what you pay to go see. That's the change in the story. So we've seen this build up. in the Purim story. Now we are at the climax. Now we're ready to go back. We're going to walk our way backwards. We started with 1, 2, 3. Now we went all the way to 7 and 8. 8 is the middle. Now we're going to start counting backwards. Now we go to 7, 6, 5. Because 7 and 7 are going to mirror each other. 6 and 6 are going to mirror each other, and so on. So here's 7 mirror, right? What was number 7? Okay, let me go back and look, right? Esther's first banquet. That was number 7. 7 mirror is Esther's second banquet. We're going to start walking this backwards. So Esther's second banquet, chapter 7, verse 1. It says, "Now the king and Haman came to drink wine with Esther, the queen." That's number 7. Number 6 is Esther's petition to the king. Why? Because number 6 on the other side was Mordecai's petition to Esther. He said to Esther, you better go in and you ask for the salvation of our people. Number 6 over here, she goes in and she asks for the salvation of her people. You see how they mirror one another? So, verse 2, 7, 2. "And the king said to Esther on the second day, also as they drank wine at the banquet, 'What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be done.' Then Queen Esther replied, 'If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me as my petition, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Now, if we had only been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have remained silent, for the trouble would not be commensurate with the annoyance to the king.' Then King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, 'Who is he, and where is he who will presume to do thus?' Esther said, 'A foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman.' Then Haman became terrified before the king and the queen. And the result is number 5. Number 5 on the one side was the anti-Jewish edict. As a result of her petition, now we have a pro-Jewish edict. 8:9 says, chapter 8, verse 9. "So the king's scribes were called at the time in the 3rd month, that is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews. The satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces which extended from India to Ethiopia, provinces to every province according to its script, to every people according to their language, as well as to the Jews according to their script and their language. He wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horses, riding on steeds sired by the royal stud. In them the king granted the Jews who were in each and every city the right to assemble, to defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate the entire army of any people or province which might attack them, including children and women, and to plunder their spoil. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the 13th day of the 12th month, that is, the month Adar, a copy of the edict to be issued as law in each and every province was published to all the peoples, so that the Jews would be ready for this day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, hastened and impelled by the king's command, went out, riding on the royal steeds, and the decree was given out at the citadel in Susa." The reversal was such that the edict for the Jews to defend themselves was to be carried out on the same day. So to the day was the extent of the reversal, to the very same day. Number four was Haman's elevation. Now, we don't have Haman's descent here, but we have something better. We have Mordecai's exaltation. That's the true reversal. Verse 8, chapter 8, verse 15. Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white, with a large crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. This is what we disrupt when we don't prepare people or children or ourselves to go through the conflict and into the confrontation so that they can experience God's reversal. When you wait on God's reversal, you walk out like this, with a crown, with a royal robe, and people celebrating you. Wait on God's reversals. Number three. What was number three on the other side? Well, Esther came in hiding her Jewish identity. Look what happens here now, verse 17, chapter 8, 17. In each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, and feast and a holiday. And many among the peoples of the land became Jews. She had to hide her Jewish identity. Now people are converting to Judaism. Openly. No shame. No need to hide. It's an amazing reversal. It's extravagant. It's over the top. But we need this lesson. It says the dread of the Jews had fallen on them. Well, number two was the banquet of the Persians. We got to have some banquets here for the Jews, right? So verse 20, chapter 9, verse 20. Then Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day of the month of Adar, and the 15th day of the same month annually. Celebrating Purim inserts us into the story. And there is a place for Jews and for non-Jews. Those who have come to worship with the Jews, the God of Israel, and the Messiah of Israel. To this day, amen. This celebration means that reversal. We are acknowledging that reversal. We conclude with number one. Number one was the greatness of Ahasuerus. And now we have the greatness of Ahasuerus and Mordecai. It's a simple addition. It's how the story ends. That whereas your name was nowhere to be found, imagine Mordecai adding his name to the king. Unthinkable. But he was a leader. He was a leader in the Jewish community. And the Lord made him a leader in the entire empire. chapter 10, verse 1 says, "Now King Ahasuerus laid a tribute on the land and on the coastlands of the sea." If you don't know what a tribute is, he imposed some taxes. Got to have them taxes. "And all the accomplishments of his authority and strength, and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and in favor with his many kinsmen, one who sought the good of his people, and one who spoke for the welfare of his whole nation." What an amazing reversal. Wait on God's reversal. Persevere through the tough part of the story, of your story. This is the lesson of Esther. Wait on God. I don't know what the conflict is in your story. I don't know what the confrontation is. I don't know what the desire of your heart is. What the purpose for which, for this purpose, perhaps you have attained this position. I don't know what that purpose is for you. Maybe you yourself don't even know it yet clearly. But it's not the time to seek for a soft story, to look for a story with no arc. You need the arc, whether it's going up and coming down, or whether it's coming down and going up. You need to say yes, to persevere through the tough parts of your story, that he may exalt you, that he may bring about the reversal that you need, because the purpose and the desire of your heart will never come to pass if it is not through a reversal. You have to go through a reversal. The sooner, the better. The earlier, the more that time you will have to enjoy the second half. I want to ask you to make a commitment today to yourself and to the Lord that you're going to wait on the reversal, whatever that looks like. You may not know what that looks like, but there is a reversal that needs to happen, that he wants to bring about. Almost every person in Scripture went through a reversal. You will not be the exception unless you forfeit the story that he has for you. Remember Samson? The last act, he fulfilled the purpose of his life in his last act. Even if it was in his death, God brought about the reversal that needed to take place in his life. He refused to submit himself to the process. But God brought it about, even in his last breath. But you don't need to be in your last breath. I'm a school, and I'm one of the old guys, of course. I'm closer in age to the professors and in some cases I'm older than the professors. And I'm okay with that. But my story is that I should have been at that school in the year 2000. I am 22 years late. Now, I'll tell you, I'm not going to let that stop me. I'd rather now than never. But those 20 years would have been nice to have on the other side, where I would have had an extra 20 years. Well, you can't get into the what if and what if and what if and what if. Because the truth is that I just wasn't ready. And I would have probably damaged things so bad that, forget the 20 years, it would have been even longer. But the point is now. I'm here now. Let me buckle down, go through what I need to go through so I can see that reversal. Amen. Let me pray for you.